So we're here to talk about design, brave design, possibilities of design. So to start off, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. I'm Jon Lax. I'm product design director at Facebook. I oversee a wide range of products, including events, pages, our developer network, and our marketplaces and payments work.
Shalin Amin. I'm the director of design at Uber. I've been there for 4 years and started off working on the product side, working on the Rider app, the Driver app, and most recently the rebrand of Uber. And now I'm heading up the brand team. Yeah.
Interesting. So I mean, you both have applications and tools that people use, but you're talking about massive numbers of people. A lot of these startups are hoping to get to their first 100,000 users, but you guys are working with millions of users on a regular basis. How do you speak to that when you think about product design? How do you take a large number, a diverse number of people and try to build features that everyone's going to appreciate?
Well, I think that the way that I think about all products, and then specifically at Facebook, is products go through these cycles, right? When you start, they have no users, and so your challenge is then in designing that product is trying to build something that people want to use and find valuable and will come back to again and again. And so you get to kind of do whatever you want in those early days. You can try a lot of stuff and you can experiment. And then as you start to mature your product and get a bunch of users, it actually becomes a bit more difficult to just redesign your product. And so you start to go up to this point where you're doing optimizations, you're doing a bunch of things, because you can't just change it all. Like, people just can't show up one day and it's suddenly different and they have to learn. We can't just redesign newsfeed and randomly. But then your product will go back into a moment where it does need reinvention, it needs reimagination, it needs discontinuous change to happen. And so you're going to go through these cycles of doing that and navigating, especially when you have a lot of users, how do you get them into the next level of product is an interesting challenge. We can talk about more, but I'll let Shalin talk a little bit.
Yeah, so I think a great example of that is for us when we started working on the product side at Uber, the basic agenda was push a button, get a ride, right? And it did that brilliantly for the 5-6 cities that we were in. And so as we started scaling globally to different countries, India, China, the Middle East, and what we realized is that our needs started becoming different. And so we needed to reimagine not the overall core experience, but we needed to design features that were empathetic to those countries and cities, right? So in India, you have a large population of drivers that can't read. And so how do you design features and functionality that accommodates for those users? And so we started thinking about providing a central place in which the mobile app was their one-stop shop for all their business needs, right? So we were typically used to kind of sending communication through email and SMS and all these other channels, and we decided to consolidate and just create a newsfeed within the driver app itself. And so you get to a place where you have a core set of features, and then you start building and slowly evolving the overall experience. And so it's not a reimagination of sorts, especially when you're at millions of users. And so you introduce features slowly, and you test out amongst a small select control group and see if things are working and things are not working. You do research, obviously, you get feedback from users, so there's qualitative and quantitative data that you're looking at to see what's working and what's not.
Right. I think it's interesting that you are talking about massive amounts of users, and I think in both cases, like Facebook started as a I want to remember my friends from college and grew into something different. Uber started as just in a few places to click a button, get a ride, but both things have become so much bigger, and the product kind of changes the way the look and feel as you incorporate more feedback. How do you kind of take a look at that over time and say, okay, can we get back to the more simpler times, or do we want to continue to focus on making small incremental changes and stay a little bit less bold?
Yeah, so Uber has a philosophy of making big, bold bets, right? That's what we do, and it's our job as product designers, as people on the brand team, to develop essentially frameworks and systems, right? The business is going to continue to grow, and you have to allow and create a framework in which people can do what they need to do to support the businesses in different regions and different cities. And so we look at it from a product perspective, essentially creating a framework that other programs, other teams, other cities can plug into so that it meets the needs of that particular city. And every city for us is very different, right? In the regulations, the rules, the the way that people get signed up, it's always different in different countries. So we think about, as we're designing an app, whether it's a driver or rider app, we start thinking about it as a framework that allows people to create components, to create different flows that still feel seamless, but it's still part of the overall experience.
The one thing I'll not challenge you on, but maybe give some context to is that, Facebook as a product is really trying to achieve a mission of making the world more open and connected. And the way that Mark started that journey was by what he knew, which was his college. But if you think about everything that Facebook is rolling out, it's in service of that mission, right? To make the world more open and connected. And so I think that there is no going back to like a quote unquote simpler time, because I think the mission requires that we continue to do that. I think that where an interesting question becomes, which is that we haven't found it yet, but is at some point, can one app do it all? And I think that is something that we constantly are asking ourselves. And we'll continue to explore, but I think for now there's still a lot of things we can do inside of the core app.
And from a design perspective, I mean, when you're talking about an app that can do it all, is that something that you want to continue pushing that limit? You don't ever want to kind of find that limit? You want to continue to design and say, look, we've actually made the ultimate Swiss Army knife of applications? Yeah,
so I think that the designers at Facebook, one thing that we're always, like, these debates happen every day, right? Where you'll think like, oh, there's no way I can make this work inside of this thing. It's just the interaction I want to do, or the thing I want to do is to advance. And yet we always seem to find a way to make it work. Like, I think that what might feel like a constraint is actually really, really good. And so every time we think like, oh, we're gonna have to build a separate app, it's like, no, we don't. And we find ways to do it. I think like Shalin was talking about, we're building systems that are ideally very extensible, that can incorporate a lot of different use cases and a lot of different people globally. And the design challenge there is an awesome design challenge about how do you figure that out? Because these are really big problems to go out and solve. And I think that we're pretty energized by those. But I think from the outside, they may feel like they're really restrictive, but they're actually pretty big problems to go work on. Yeah,
and you've had that experience with Messenger. We've done it with Uber Eats within the app, right? So you build it, if you have a framework that can support those needs, we essentially use the Uber app as an experimentation platform for other verticals that we're in. So Uber Eats is a great example. We have Uber Eats built into the app. We're kind of piggybacking off the brand, seeing what's working, what's not working, and then making the decision, okay, do we separate the app? Do we keep it consolidated? And ultimately, again, we're looking at, this is one global app that serves an entire community, and so we have to look at size of the builds, right, as a decision maker.
Yep.
And so ultimately, we decided that Uber Eats can stand alone as its own app. And while there's a way for users to jump off from the Rider app to the Eats app, we've kind of made a conscious decision of building out a separate app, because it just doesn't make sense for all the things and the roadmap that the Eats team has to build that within the Rider app.
And like another example on Facebook is the Pages Manager app. If you're managing a page for business, there's a whole bunch of functions that were hard to build into the core app and probably made sense in their own app, and that's a real power user, run your business type application. So we will separate out certain things, and I think your driver apps are probably in that category too.
Yeah.
So I mean, the interesting thing that seems to keep coming up is feedback, and I'm sure that both of you, at a certain level, you're not getting that feedback if someone goes on Twitter and says, "Oh my God, my Facebook feed is screwed up. The design is terrible," and that's what you're following. How do you get that feedback, and how do you incorporate it? Is it like you said? You start by launching to a small focus group and growing from there, or is there like a larger sense of you're starting to see more and more things trend over time,
right,
and that's indicative of maybe a change is in order?
Yeah, I mean, feedback is super important in the design process, right? And sometimes, having gone through the Rider app, the Driver app, and especially the rebrand, certain things you can lean on to receive feedback and do focus groups. I think product is a great way to kind of understand what your consumers and users want out of your product. And there are times that you can't really lean on focus groups to define essentially your brand, right? The brand is inherently, intrinsic to what a company is all about, and it takes a lot of, looking inward to figure out, what do we stand for? What's our mission? What's our purpose? What are our promises? And I'm going to be covering that in my talk, I think at like 11 o'clock. But
And
really,
that's on the builder stage. You should all head there.
but really, I mean, feedback is critical. And so post brand relaunch, the feedback that we got was super helpful. And we treat the brand very much like a product. It's a very iterative kind of process. We've developed a framework again for the brand itself because we don't want to go through that process of redoing the entire brand again in 2 years. And so we basically built a framework that allows us to kind of tweak certain parts of it so that it can be used differently in different countries. And I think it's important to come at it from a systems perspective versus kind of build a thing and just and hope that it lasts forever. We know that the world moves too fast and the business of Uber is always changing. So our goal is to basically define systems that help us evolve over time versus sticking to something that's tried and true.
We spend a lot of time going out and talking to people. So we spend a lot of time doing research trips around the world, and our teams, our designers, our researchers, sometimes our engineers will go out and spend time with people talking to them. And then we use data as another input in where we look at how people are using the system. The one thing that we do see at Facebook is people will start to use Facebook in a way that we didn't anticipate. And so there's this like latent, they hack the system essentially. And then we can kind of see that and say, oh, we should just make this better for people. So an example of that is a little over a year ago, we started to notice that people were doing a lot of selling, buying and selling of goods. If you may have seen this in your news feed, one of your friends selling an item and saying, hey, does anyone buy this couch or this thing that I have, this iPhone? And when we looked into the system, we were a little bit surprised to see that there were hundreds of millions of items for sale on Facebook at any given time. And a lot of this was occurring inside of groups. These people were creating local for sale groups, especially outside of North America, to buy and sell goods locally. And we weren't doing anything to make that a better experience for them. It was kind of a pain. So what you had was administrators, going through posts for old ones that were sold and like deleting them, and it wasn't awesome. And so we just spent a lot of time just making that better. So now we have for sale groups where you can actually put a price in, you can mark things as sold, which has made that experience a lot better. So that wasn't necessarily something where we were like, oh, we want to just go and do this. We saw our community doing it, and we just made it better for them. So that happens quite a bit at Facebook.
Now, I think on top of that, I mean, we have the public, the citizens who are using your applications, but also, there's the people that work there that are using it. Do you get a lot of feedback from the engineers themselves?
We dog food a lot of stuff, which is good and bad. I think that, so we are the first users of our own products, and we are always dog fooding our own products. I think that's great because there's a lot of stuff that we just use and be like, you know what, this isn't that good, or we don't believe in this that heavily. A lot of things never make their way out of our builds. I think where it's maybe not awesome is we are like the most demanding users of Facebook, and so things that we want may not be what everyone else wants, and so we have to always be conscious of that bias and making sure that we're not just looking at it through our, we're on the fastest devices on really good networks, and doing that.
Yeah, and we have the same process. I mean, we obviously dog food our own products. Very recently, we started having our own employees sign up to become drivers, and so getting behind the wheel, understanding and being empathetic to what a first-time driver experience is, going through the onboarding flow, and finding the pain points, right, that are very clear, and solving those right away. Understanding the fear of like getting behind a wheel and having this machine kind of tell you where to go and what the best route is. It's like, how do you take the fear out of driving a little bit? And so just starting to put yourself in the shoes of a user and seeing how you can make the product experience better. We have feedback loops, obviously, between riders and drivers at the end of every trip. There's opportunities for drivers and riders to both submit feedback, and we certainly go through that and develop, take the highest priority items that are kind of getting surfaced and saying, how do we solve those problems from a roadmap perspective, and really pay attention to what the users want. At the end of the day, we're going to move as fast as our customers move, right? And so we are constantly just developing features and experiences that are at the top of mind for consumers. So
awesome, and we're running out. This went really quickly, really quickly. So any kind of closing remarks before we head out? Just so everyone knows, both of these gentlemen will be speaking on the Builder stage later today. I will be moderating and emceeing the Builder stage, so I highly recommend it. But any kind of closing remarks before we head off? Closing remarks.
I think that when you talk about designing at scale, or whether you're a startup or you do have something that has product market fit and is really taking off. The important part is just understanding that products go in rhythms and trying to understand where you are in that rhythm, because there's times where you're just optimizing, and then there's times where you want to do wholesale change, and just getting good at sort of seeing where you are in that life cycle is an important.
Yeah, and I guess from a design perspective, for me, it's all about as you're building your startup, think about your users, obviously do research, get out there, talk to consumers and figure out what it is that they want to build, what it is that you need to build for them, and really try to find an environment in which collaboration is happening along all points, right? I've worked at many startups and at many consulting agencies where design is this second stepchild on the side, right? And I think great ideas come from collaboration between engineering, product design, and finding ways to facilitate those conversations early on in building a startup makes for the journey of building that startup much more powerful, right? So as you're thinking through that, everybody is a first-class citizen, users, but also your engineers, your designers, your product managers. Everybody has great ideas. It's just finding ways to kind of surface that within the organization is going to be super beneficial as you start to scale and grow. It'll affect the culture of how you guys make products at the end of the day. And so that would be my one piece of advice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for coming up and talking, and thank you to everybody who stuck around.
Thanks. Thank you.